Michael Jackson's son just revealed something we all suspected, but no one was ready to hear it. For years, fans have debated the real story behind the king of pop's personal life, his struggles, his triumphs, and the way he raised his children. Some believed he was an overprotective father who shielded them from the world. Others speculated that his fame and past controversies created an unbearable weight for his kids to carry. But now, after staying quiet for so long, Michael's eldest son, Prince, has finally spoken out. And what he just confirmed will leave you speechless. So how do Michael Jackson's children truly feel about their father's legacy? Do they see him as the loving dad he always wanted to be? Or has the pressure of his name become too much to bear? And most importantly, what shocking truth has Prince Jackson finally admitted? Stay with us, because this revelation changes everything. When you think of music legends, few names shine as brightly as Michael Jackson. Dubbed the king of pop, he wasn't just a musician. He was a global phenomenon. With a career spanning over 4 decades, Michael redefined what it meant to be an entertainer. From the moment he burst onto the scene as the child prodigy of the Jackson 5, it was clear he was different. His voice had a raw, soulful power that few could match, and his performances were electrifying. By the time he went solo, he had already mastered the art of showmanship, creating groundbreaking hits like Billie Jean, Thriller, and Beat It. His moonwalk wasn't just a dance move, it was a moment that changed pop culture forever. But Michael Jackson wasn't just an artist. He was an era-defining icon. His albums shattered records. Thriller remains the best-selling album of all time, selling over 70 million copies worldwide. His influence stretched beyond music. He revolutionized music videos, fashion, and live performances. His voice, his dance, and even his military-style jackets became symbols of excellence in entertainment. However, behind the dazzling stage lights and global adoration, Michael Jackson the man remained an enigma. Despite his unmatched fame, Michael lived a life filled with contradictions. He was one of the most recognized faces in the world, yet he was notoriously private. He craved love and connection, yet he often spoke about feeling isolated. He could command a stadium of 100,000 screaming fans, yet he struggled with personal relationships. His personal life was often the subject of controversy, speculation, and relentless media scrutiny. The way he looked, the way he lived, and the way he raised his children were all dissected by tabloids and critics. From his dramatic physical transformation to the lawsuits and allegations that followed him, Michael's private struggles were constantly on public display. But perhaps the biggest mystery of all was how he raised his children. For years, Michael's kids, Prince, Paris, and BG, Blanket, were kept out of the public eye. He shielded them from cameras, often covering their faces with masks when they stepped outside. Some saw this as an attempt to protect them from the chaos of fame. Others saw it as an extreme, almost bizarre form of parenting. So, what was Michael Jackson really like as a father? Did his children grow up in the shadows of his fame? Or did they experience a side of him that the world never got to see? Michael's eldest son, Prince Jackson, has finally spoken out, and his revelation will change everything you thought you knew about the king of pop. For most children, childhood is a time of innocence, laughter, and carefree days. But for Michael Jackson, childhood was nothing more than a relentless cycle of rehearsals, performances, and pressure. While most kids spent their afternoons playing outside, Michael spent his being pushed to perfection. Not by choice, but by force. His father, Joseph Jackson, had one mission: to turn his children into stars. And he succeeded. Under his iron grip, Michael and his brothers trained like athletes, rehearsing for hours every single day. There was no margin for error. A misstep or wrong note, anything less than perfection, was met with strict punishment. As Michael grew older, he spoke openly about the trauma of his childhood. His father was more of a drill sergeant than a dad, pushing him harder than any child should ever be pushed. He recalled how Joseph would mock his appearance, calling him Big Nose, and how he would often use a belt or a switch as a form of discipline. In interview after interview, Michael described his isolation, his loneliness, and his longing for a normal childhood, a childhood that never existed for him. I remember being little, walking around my neighborhood and seeing kids playing," he once said. "I would cry because it was something I could never do." That pain never left him, and it shaped one of the most important vows he ever made. He would never be like his father. Unlike Joe, Michael wanted to be a loving, affectionate, and gentle father. He wanted his children to experience what he never had, a childhood filled with joy, freedom, and normalcy. He showered them with love, encouraged them to pursue their own passions, and tried his best to shield them from the brutal reality of fame. But being Michael Jackson's child was never going to be normal. From the moment they were born, Prince, Paris, and BG were thrust into the spotlight. Michael did everything he could to protect them, covering their faces with masks, keeping them away from the media, homeschooling them, but it was never enough. The paparazzi hunted them, tabloids speculated about their lives, and the world constantly questioned Michael's parenting. Why did he make them wear masks? Why did they never go to public school? Why were they rarely seen in public? Michael defended his choices, saying he was only trying to give them the normal childhood he never had. "They don't have a normal childhood like other kids," he explained. "I want them to be as normal as possible." But did he truly succeed? Despite his efforts, his children still carried the weight of his name. They didn't have regular childhoods. They lived in Neverland, a world meant to be magical, yet often felt more like an isolated fortress. The burden of their father's legendary status meant they could never simply blend in. And when Michael died suddenly in 2009, their world changed overnight. The protective shield he had built around them was gone. No longer hidden from the public, they were thrust into a world they had been shielded from their entire lives. Cameras followed their every move. Their identities, their futures, and even their DNA were scrutinized like never before. And now, years later, Michael's children have begun to tell their own stories, and what they've revealed might shock you. Did Michael truly break the cycle of control and pressure? Or did his children, like him, still end up trapped in a world where their identity is forever defined by fame? Michael's eldest son, Prince Jackson, has finally given us the answer. And it's not what anyone expected. Being the eldest son of Michael Jackson comes with a weight that few can understand. While his father was one of the most famous and celebrated entertainers of all time, Prince Jackson has spent his life trying to create his own identity, separate from the king of pop's legacy. Unlike his father, Prince never pursued a career in music, a decision that surprised many. But while he may have stayed out of the industry that defined his father, he has finally spoken out about something fans have long suspected, a truth about Michael Jackson's struggles with fame and the emotional toll it took on him. For years, Michael was seen as an untouchable icon, a man who could moonwalk across the stage with effortless magic. But behind the scenes, the reality was far more complex. In a rare interview, Prince revealed what it was really like to be raised by one of the most famous figures in history. He confirmed that despite his global influence and adoration, his father often spoke about how fame made him feel isolated. Michael had everything: money, success, and millions of fans, but he felt like no one truly understood him. The world saw him as a superstar, but to Prince and his siblings, he was simply Dad, a father who wanted nothing more than to protect his children from the very world that both loved and scrutinized him. Prince described his father as deeply loving and caring, someone who was always present despite his demanding career. But he also admitted that Michael carried the weight of expectations and pressure like no one else. The king of pop wasn't just a performer. He was a prisoner of his own success. According to Prince, his father did everything he could to shelter his children from the darkness of fame, which is why they were rarely seen in public without masks. Many questioned Michael's parenting decisions, but Prince insists that his father only wanted to create a sense of normalcy for them, something he was never afforded in his own childhood. Despite growing up surrounded by music, Prince had no desire to follow in his father's footsteps. Instead, he pursued an education, attending Loyola Marymount University and earning a degree in business administration. He later co-founded King's Sun Productions, a film and digital content company, proving that while he may not have inherited his father's musical talent, he did inherit his creative vision. Prince has also taken on the responsibility of preserving Michael's legacy, working on projects such as the upcoming Michael Jackson biopic to ensure that his father's story is told with accuracy and respect. Even though Prince has built a life outside of the music industry, he acknowledges that he will never fully escape the shadow of his father's name. Wherever he goes, he is introduced as Michael Jackson's son. While he sees this as an honor, he has also spoken about the pressure that comes with it. People expect him to be just like his father, to carry on his legacy in a way that mirrors Michael's career, but Prince has always been clear. He is forging his own path. Perhaps the most revealing part of his interviews is how he describes Michael as a father. Unlike his own father, Joe Jackson, Michael was never harsh or controlling with his children. He was loving, patient, and always reminded them that their happiness mattered more than anything else. He didn't push them to be entertainers. Instead, he encouraged them to find their own passions. However, despite Michael's best efforts, Prince and his siblings still grew up with the intense scrutiny of the public eye. Even now, years after Michael's passing, they continue to navigate a world that will always see them as extensions of their father's legacy. Prince may have chosen a different career path, but he still carries his father's influence in everything he does. He has worked tirelessly to honor Michael's memory while creating something of his own. But the question remains, can he ever fully step out of his father's shadow? Or will he forever be known as Michael Jackson's son, before anything else? Of all Michael Jackson's children, Paris Jackson has been the most open about her life, the struggles, the fame, and the weight of carrying the Jackson name. Unlike her older brother Prince, who has largely stayed out of the limelight, and her younger brother BG, who remains intensely private, Paris has embraced public life. But stepping into the spotlight as Michael Jackson's daughter has come with immense pressure, expectations, and deeply personal struggles that she has only recently begun to share. Paris was just 11 years old when her father passed away in 2009, and the world first saw her raw, unfiltered pain at Michael's memorial service. As she tearfully spoke into the microphone, the world realized that behind all the masks and secrecy, she was just a little girl who had lost her father. But after that moment, her life took a very different path. Without Michael to shield her, she was thrust into a world she wasn't ready for, one where everyone had an opinion about who she should be, how she should act, and what she should do with her life. Unlike Prince, who pursued business and film production, Paris chose to embrace the entertainment industry, but not in the way people expected. Instead of becoming the pop princess the world assumed she would be, Paris carved her own path, diving into modeling, acting, and alternative music, rejecting the mainstream pop sound associated with her father. Her modeling career quickly took off, landing covers on Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, and Rolling Stone. She became the face of luxury brands, but she didn't just want to be another pretty face. She wanted to be seen, heard, and understood. Paris was never the polished, camera-ready Hollywood starlet. She embraced a bohemian, rebellious, rock-inspired persona, full of tattoos and free-spirited energy. She also ventured into acting, landing roles in TV series, indie films, and even American Horror Story, proving that she wasn't just riding on her last name. She had talent. But her true passion was always music. However, instead of following in her father's footsteps, she went in a completely different direction. Alternative folk rock, deeply emotional and introspective, a sound worlds apart from Michael's polished, high-energy pop hits. She formed a band, released her debut solo album, Wilted, and built a loyal fan base that appreciated her for who she was, not just for who her father was. Still, being Michael Jackson's daughter has never been easy. No matter how much she tries to create her own identity, the world still sees her through the lens of her father's legacy. And behind the glamour of her career, Paris has battled deep personal demons, struggles that she has been brutally honest about. In multiple interviews, she has opened up about her mental health struggles, revealing that she has suffered from severe depression, self-harm, and multiple suicide attempts. The pressure of growing up in the spotlight, the endless comparisons to her father, and the deep trauma of losing him at such a young age all contributed to a long and painful internal battle. She admitted that for years, she felt like she was never enough, constantly questioning her worth, struggling with self-hatred, and feeling as though she would never escape her father's shadow. Her turning point came when she decided to take control of her own life. She began therapy, embraced self-love and healing, and found strength in her music. She also rejected the expectations placed upon her, refusing to conform to what people thought a Jackson should be. "I am proud of my dad," she said in an interview, "but I am also my own person. I want people to know me for who I am, not just as Michael Jackson's daughter." Paris has finally stepped into her own identity, proving that while being a Jackson will always be a part of her story, it does not define her. She is no longer just Michael Jackson's daughter. She is Paris Jackson, an artist, a survivor, and a force of her own. Among Michael Jackson's 3 children, the youngest, Blanket Jackson, now known as B.G. Jackson, remains the most enigmatic. While Prince and Paris have embraced public life to some degree, B.G. has largely stayed in the shadows, avoiding the spotlight his father once commanded. Unlike his older siblings, who have spoken openly about their upbringing and personal struggles, B.G. has barely said a word to the media. But as he grows older, he has slowly started stepping into the world, offering rare glimpses into who he is and what his future might hold. Born Prince Michael Jackson II in 2002 through a surrogate mother, Blanket earned his famous nickname when he was still an infant, a reference to his father's habit of calling him his blanket of love. But after years of teasing and bullying over the name, he officially changed it to B.G. Jackson in 2015, signaling a desire to shed his childhood identity and step into a new phase of his life. But who is B.G. Jackson really? And what do we actually know about him? Unlike Paris, who has pursued a career in modeling, acting, and music, or Prince, who has stepped into film production and philanthropy, B.G. has taken a far more private and reserved approach to life. For most of his childhood, he remained almost entirely out of sight, only appearing in a handful of public moments. Most notably in 2010 when he, along with his siblings, accepted his father's Lifetime Achievement Award at the Grammy Awards. Even then, he barely spoke. Growing up without his father was undoubtedly difficult, but B.G. was raised primarily by his grandmother, Katherine Jackson, and later by his older brother, Prince. Michael's unexpected passing meant that B.G.'s childhood was not only shaped by grief, but also by the overwhelming legacy of the Jackson name. For years, the only thing the public knew about B.G. was that he was quiet, reserved, and extremely private. He stayed away from interviews, rarely made public appearances, and unlike his older siblings, he had no social media presence for a long time. This air of mystery led to speculation. Was he interested in music? Did he want to follow in his father's footsteps? Or did he want nothing to do with fame? As he entered adulthood, however, B.G. began to show signs of stepping into the public eye on his own terms. He made a rare appearance in 2021, speaking briefly about climate change in a video interview, a shocking moment for fans who had almost never heard his voice before. He spoke with calm confidence, and while he didn't discuss his father, the moment proved that he was slowly beginning to carve out his own identity. More recently, B.G. has hinted at a deep passion for film and production, much like his older brother Prince. Sources close to the Jackson family have revealed that he has a strong interest in both filmmaking and storytelling, and that he has been quietly studying the industry. While he has not officially announced any projects, there have been rumors that he wants to get involved in movie production, a path that would allow him to express his creativity without stepping into the overwhelming spotlight that comes with being Michael Jackson's son. Despite his increasing public presence, B.G. remains intensely private. He still avoids interviews, rarely attends events, and keeps his personal life completely under wraps. Unlike Paris, who has openly spoken about her struggles with mental health and identity, or Prince, who has taken on the role of preserving Michael Jackson's legacy, B.G. appears to be focused on living life his own way, free from the expectations placed on him by the world. For now, he remains a mystery, but one thing is clear. He is no longer just Michael Jackson's youngest son. He is B.G. Jackson, a young man stepping into his own future, one that he will define on his own terms. Being the child of Michael Jackson is both a privilege and a lifelong burden. While many might assume that being the offspring of one of the greatest entertainers in history would come with endless advantages, wealth, connections, and worldwide recognition, the reality is far more complicated. For Prince, Paris, and B.G., Their father's name has been both a shield and a curse. From the moment they were born, the world had expectations for them. Michael went to great lengths to protect them from the public eye, covering their faces in public, homeschooling them, and creating a secluded, insulated world at Neverland Ranch. But despite his efforts, they could never truly escape the enormous shadow of the Jackson name. After Michael's shocking death in 2009, his children were suddenly thrust into the global spotlight in a way they had never experienced before. At Michael's memorial, the world saw a raw and heartbreaking moment when Paris, just 11 years old at the time, took the microphone and sobbed, "Ever since I was born, Daddy has been the best father you could ever imagine. And I just want to say I love him so much." That moment shattered the mystique surrounding Michael's children and showed the world that, beyond the headlines and speculation, they were simply kids who had lost their father. But growing up as Michael Jackson's children meant inheriting not just his fame, but also the controversies that followed him throughout his life. Michael's legal battles and the infamous allegations against him, which dominated headlines in both 1993 and 2003, left a permanent stain on his legacy. Even though he was never convicted of any crime and was fully acquitted in 2005, public opinion remains divided. Some fans continue to defend him fiercely, while others question the truth behind the allegations. And unfortunately, his children have been forced to live with the weight of that speculation for their entire lives. Prince, Paris, and BG were too young to fully grasp the intensity of those legal battles at the time, but as they grew older, they began to understand the way the world saw their father, not just as the king of pop, but also as a deeply polarizing figure. To this day, anytime a documentary, news report, or social media debate about Michael resurfaces, his children are dragged back into a discussion they never chose to be part of. For Paris, this has been particularly painful. She has spoken openly about how difficult it is to hear her father's name constantly associated with controversy rather than his music and humanitarian work. She has defended him multiple times, but has also admitted that she has had to learn to tune out the noise in order to survive. Prince, on the other hand, has taken a more strategic approach. Rather than engaging in public battles over his father's legacy, he has focused on preserving Michael's artistic and philanthropic contributions. He has worked behind the scenes on projects that celebrate Michael's impact on music and culture, hoping to shift the conversation away from the endless controversy. As for BG, he has remained the most private, never addressing the scandals publicly. Perhaps this is his way of shielding himself from the pain and scrutiny that his siblings have had to endure. Beyond the controversies, there is another challenge that all three Jackson children face daily: the struggle to be recognized for who they are, rather than just as extensions of their father's legacy. No matter what they do, they're always introduced as Michael Jackson's children. If Paris releases music, people compare it to her father's. If Prince works in film, people ask why he isn't following in Michael's footsteps. If BG tries to stay out of the spotlight, the world still wants to know what he's doing. This constant comparison and expectation can be overwhelming. Prince once admitted that the pressure of being Michael Jackson's son is something he thinks about every single day. He knows that no matter how successful he becomes, he will never escape his father's name. Paris, who has embraced modeling, acting, and alternative music, has worked hard to establish her own unique artistic identity. She has openly rejected the idea that she needs to live up to her father's musical legacy, choosing instead to forge her own indie rock sound. But despite her efforts, the world continues to view her through the lens of Michael's legacy, a reality she has had to learn to accept. Even in their personal lives, the Jackson name is inescapable. Any relationship they enter, any friendship they form, there is always the lingering question: do they genuinely care for me? Or do they just want to be close to the Jackson legacy? Despite the weight of their father's past, Prince, Paris, and BG have all taken different paths to build lives of their own. Prince has focused on film production and philanthropy, actively working on projects that preserve his father's legacy while ensuring he has his own independent career. Paris has found solace in her music and artistic expression, using her struggles as inspiration for her art while trying to step out of her father's shadow. BG, though the most private, has begun to slowly step into the public eye, hinting at a future in film and storytelling. perhaps the safest way to carry on Michael's creative spirit without directly following in his footsteps. But no matter how much they try to forge their own paths, the Jackson name will always follow them. They did not choose their last name, nor the legacy attached to it. Yet, they have been forced to live with the burden of expectation, the weight of scandal, and the unrelenting comparisons their entire lives. They are not just Michael Jackson's kids. They are individuals, each with their own stories to tell. But the world may never fully let them be anything else. Michael Jackson was more than just the king of pop. He was also a father, a role that he considered his most important and cherished. While the world saw him as an enigmatic, larger-than-life superstar, behind closed doors, he was simply dad to Prince, Paris, and BG. Well, what kind of father was he? Was he strict, overprotective, or was he the gentle, nurturing parent he had always longed to have? For years, Michael's parenting was a mystery, with many outsiders speculating about how he raised his children. Some saw his methods, like making his kids wear masks in public, as extreme. Others questioned whether he was capable of raising children given his own isolated and unconventional upbringing. But as his children have grown older, they have begun to speak for themselves, revealing the truth about the man behind the fame and the kind of father he truly was. Michael's own childhood was strict, controlled, and often painful. His father, Joseph Jackson, was infamous for his harsh discipline, treating his sons more like performers than children. He pushed them relentlessly, instilling a fear-driven work ethic that made them successful, but left deep emotional scars. Michael vowed that when he became a father, he would do things differently. Unlike Joseph, he wanted to be a kind, affectionate, and hands-on father. He showered his children with love, attention, and constant reassurance, telling them every day that he loved them. Instead of pushing them towards show business, he encouraged them to explore their own interests and pursue happiness above all else. He was the best dad you could ever imagine, Paris Jackson once said. And I just want to say I love him so much. Michael's goal was simple: to give his kids the childhood he never had. From the very beginning, Michael did everything he could to protect his children from the harsh realities of fame. He famously had them wear masks and veils in public, a move that confused and even disturbed some people. But his reason was simple. He wanted them to be able to walk freely in public without being recognized. He knew what it was like to have his childhood stripped away by fame, and he didn't want the same fate for them. He created Neverland Ranch, a massive property complete with a zoo, a movie theater, and amusement park rides, all designed to give his children a magical, carefree childhood. Unlike his own upbringing, which was strict and regimented, Michael made sure his kids could play, explore, and just be kids. But he wasn't just about fun and games. He also took his role as a teacher and protector seriously. He homeschooled them, ensuring that their education was tailored to their individual needs and interests. He taught them life lessons, the importance of kindness, and the value of hard work. He introduced them to art, literature, and music, encouraging them to develop critical thinking and creativity. He would always say, "You have to be the best at whatever you do. It doesn't matter what it is, just be great at it," Prince Jackson recalled. But most of all, Michael instilled in them a deep sense of love and compassion, a trait he was known for throughout his own life. "My dad made sure we were cultured. He made sure we knew about different parts of the world, different poverty levels. He wanted us to know that not everybody lives the way we do," Paris once shared. Despite his deep love for his children, Michael was still one of the most famous men on the planet. Balancing his career and fatherhood was a constant struggle. On one hand, he was a global icon, a man whose every move was followed by cameras and fans. On the other, he was a father who just wanted to tuck his kids in a bed at night and read them bedtime stories. He often took his children on tour with him, but he made sure they never felt neglected. When he was working, he would spend every free moment with them, making sure they knew that they were always his top priority. Even with the intense pressure of being Michael Jackson, he still managed to be a present and attentive father. Even when he was on tour, he would call us 5 times a day, Prince recalled. He would ask us about our schoolwork, about what we were learning, what we were passionate about. But despite his best efforts, there were challenges he couldn't control. The media's constant scrutiny, the lawsuits, and the controversies surrounding him inevitably affected his children. They grew up knowing that their father was one of the most beloved yet controversial figures in history. They heard the whispers, saw the headlines, and had to navigate the complicated reality of being Michael Jackson's kids. And then, in 2009, their world shattered completely. Michael's sudden death in 2009 was devastating for his children. He was their entire world, the only parent they had ever known, and suddenly he was gone. Prince, Paris, and BG were left to navigate life without him, while also dealing with the overwhelming media frenzy surrounding his passing. For Paris, the loss hit the hardest. She spiraled into deep depression, struggling with self-harm and suicidal thoughts in the years that followed. She later admitted that losing her father left an unfillable void in her heart, one that she spent years trying to cope with. Prince, being the eldest, felt the need to step up and take care of his younger siblings. He became a protector, making sure Paris and BG had the support they needed. And BG, the youngest, became even more withdrawn, choosing to stay out of the public eye as much as possible. Looking back, it's clear that Michael Jackson was not a perfect man, but he was the father he always wanted to be. He didn't just raise his children with love. He raised them with intention, making sure they were kind, compassionate, and free to become whoever they wanted to be. His children, despite the enormous weight of his legacy, continue to honor his memory in their own way. Prince has dedicated himself to philanthropy and film production, carrying on Michael's humanitarian spirit. Paris has pursued music and art, using her creativity as a way to process her emotions and heal from the past. And BG, though still private, has slowly started stepping into the world, showing signs that he may one day continue his father's creative legacy. Michael wanted to give his kids a childhood filled with love, magic, and freedom, and in many ways he succeeded. But even the greatest love cannot protect children from the weight of the world. They may forever be known as Michael Jackson's children, but the truth is, to them, he wasn't just the king of pop. He was dad. More than a decade after Michael Jackson's passing, his three children, Prince, Paris, and BG Jackson, have grown into adulthood, each forging their own path in the world. From the moment they were born, they were thrust into a life of fame, expectations, and constant media attention, all because of their father's larger-than-life legacy. But as they've matured, each of them has taken a different route, some embracing their father's influence, while others have worked hard to step out of his massive shadow. As the eldest son, Prince Jackson always felt a sense of responsibility, not just for preserving his father's memory, but also for protecting his younger siblings. Unlike Michael, Prince had no desire to become a musician. While he appreciates his father's music, he has admitted that he doesn't have the same musical talent. Instead, he developed a passion for film production and business, wanted to be behind the scenes rather than in the spotlight. He attended Loyola Marymount University, where he earned a degree in business administration. After graduating, he co-founded King's Son Productions, a company specializing in digital content and film projects. His goal was simple: to tell stories, build creative projects, and carve out a future that wasn't solely reliant on his father's legacy. Beyond film, Prince has also dedicated time to philanthropy, something that was deeply important to his father. He co-founded Heal Los Angeles, a charity focused on helping underprivileged communities, providing food, school supplies, and support for children in need. While Prince has made it clear that he respects and honors his father's legacy, he also acknowledges that being Michael Jackson's son is something he will never escape. He has often spoken about the weight of expectations, admitting that people constantly expect him to live up to Michael's level of greatness. But rather than attempting the impossible, he has chosen to honor his father's name in his own way, through storytelling, charity work, and carrying on Michael's humanitarian spirit. Paris Jackson, on the other hand, has taken an entirely different approach. While Prince represents the business-minded protector of the family, Paris is the wild, artistic soul, a free-spirited musician, model, and actress who has spent years defying expectations. Many assumed she would follow in Michael's footsteps as a pop singer, but Paris rejected the idea of becoming a mainstream pop star. Instead, she pursued a completely different genre, alternative folk rock, filled with raw, emotional lyrics that reflect her personal struggles. She released her debut solo album, Wilted, which showcased a dark, introspective, and poetic sound, proving that she wasn't just riding on her father's name. She had talent in her own right. Aside from music, Paris has built a successful modeling career, appearing on the covers of Vogue, Rolling Stone, and Harper's Bazaar, and working with major brands. She has also dabbled in acting, taking roles in TV shows and indie films, including American Horror Story. But despite her creative success, Paris has struggled with deep personal demons. She has been open about her battles with depression, self-harm, and suicidal thoughts, revealing that growing up as Michael Jackson's daughter was both a privilege and a curse. The pressure, the expectations, and the constant comparisons to her father took a toll on her mental health. She has admitted that for years, she felt like she was never enough, constantly questioning her worth, struggling with self-hatred, and feeling as though she would never escape her father's shadow. Despite everything, Paris has emerged as a fiercely independent artist, refusing to let the world define her solely by her father's name. She honors his memory in her own way, not by imitating him, but by being unapologetically herself. She has learned to embrace both her connection to Michael Jackson and her desire to be seen as her own person, something that has taken years of emotional growth. Out of all three siblings, B.G. Jackson, formerly known as Blanket, remains the most private and mysterious. Unlike Paris and Prince, who have been open with the public, B.G. has largely avoided the spotlight for most of his life. As the youngest of Michael Jackson's children, B.G. was only 7 years old when his father passed away. While Prince and Paris had some understanding of the world before Michael's death, B.G. never really knew a life outside of his father's shadow. For most of his childhood, he was raised by his grandmother, Katherine Jackson, and later by Prince. He rarely made public appearances and avoided interviews, choosing to keep his personal life completely private. However, as he has grown older, B.G. has started to slowly step into the world, but on his own terms. In 2021, he surprised fans by appearing in a rare interview where he spoke about climate change and his hopes for the future. Though he didn't discuss his father, it was the first time people heard his voice and saw a glimpse of his personality. Sources close to the Jackson family have hinted that B.G. has a strong interest in film and storytelling, much like his brother Prince. While he has not officially announced any projects, there have been rumors that he wants to get involved in movie production, a path that would allow him to be creative without stepping into the intense spotlight his father once lived in. The biggest question surrounding Prince, Paris, and B.G. is whether they are embracing their father's legacy or trying to escape it. The answer? A little bit of both. Prince carries on his father's humanitarian and creative legacy through film and charity work, honoring Michael's influence while creating his own identity. Paris has completely rejected the pop music world, choosing instead to be her own kind of artist, proving that she is more than just Michael Jackson's daughter. B.G. remains a mystery, but he is slowly stepping into the creative world, though he seems to prefer working behind the scenes rather than in front of the camera. Regardless of their individual paths, one thing is clear. Michael Jackson's children are more than just his legacy. They are their own people, each navigating the world in a way that honors their father while also defining their own futures. They may never escape the Jackson name, but they have proven that they are not just Michael Jackson's children. They are Prince, Paris, and B.G., each with a story of their own to tell. For over a decade, Prince, Paris, and B.G. Jackson have spent their lives trying to navigate a world that will never see them as just ordinary individuals. They were born into a legacy that is larger than life, carrying the name of a man who wasn't just a musician, but a cultural phenomenon. No matter what they do, where they go, or how much they try to create their own path, the name Jackson will always follow them. Each of Michael's children has approached this reality in their own way. Prince Jackson has chosen to embrace his father's legacy through film production and philanthropy, keeping Michael's humanitarian spirit alive while staying far from the music industry. Paris Jackson, on the other hand, has rebelled against expectations, forging her own identity through alternative music, modeling, and acting, proving that she is more than just Michael Jackson's daughter. And then there's B.G. Jackson, the most private of the three, who has carefully stepped into adulthood, exploring film and storytelling while staying out of the media's grasp as much as possible. But as Prince recently confirmed, there is one undeniable truth. No matter how hard they try, they will never fully escape their father's legacy. Michael Jackson was more than just a pop star. He was an icon, a legend, and a figure who changed the music industry forever. His influence is too great, his impact too deep, and his story too complicated for the world to ever let go. While his children love and admire him, they also know that the weight of his name is both a blessing and a burden. Every decision they make is scrutinized. Every step they take is compared to what Michael would have done. Some people expect them to live up to his greatness, while others expect them to fall under the weight of his controversies. The truth is, they will always be defined by their father's name, whether they want to be or not. But perhaps the real question isn't whether they can escape Michael Jackson's shadow, but whether they even need to. Despite everything, his children have proven that they are strong, resilient, and determined to carve out lives of their own. They may always be linked to the king of pop, but they are not prisoners of his legacy. Instead, they're shaping it in their own way, honoring his memory while refusing to be controlled by it. So what do you think? Will Michael Jackson's children ever truly escape his shadow, or will they forever be defined by his legacy? One thing is for sure, the world will always be watching.